Joining me is one of the members of the Senate committee which investigated this law, Liberal Senator James Paterson, a free speech advocate. James, this report, how can you deliver a report where no one agrees to anything, and it has on the one hand, oh, well, look, maybe you want no change, or maybe you want a little bit of change, and that's it? What's the good of it?
Well, Andrew, I understand why you're a bit down on the report, but I'm a bit more optimistic. For a start, the report acknowledged, and everyone on the committee agreed, that the status quo must change. We all agreed that the QUT case was a disgrace, and what happened to those students is a disgrace. We all agreed that the Human Rights Commission's processes must change to avoid something like that happening again. Now, not everyone agreed, but I certainly very strongly believe that although Human Rights Commission changes are necessary, that they're not sufficient. I believe we also need to change Section 18C. I'd like to see some consequential changes to Section 18D, and I think that's the only way we can be sure that we'll never have another QUT case or another Bill Leak case or indeed another Andrew Bolt case.
Yeah, well, the changes that are recommended by this committee would not have stopped my articles from being banned, would not have stopped ludicrous claims being lodged against the cartoonist Bill Leak, wouldn't stop a lot of the monstering we're getting from people having a try-on of, you know, let me just put in a complaint and you pay me go-away money for fear of your reputation being damaged. This is a joke of a report, isn't it? I mean, it's a complete squib.
Well, Andrew, it all depends on what recommendations the government takes up. If it takes up the recommendation that I and some of my fellow Liberal members of the committee support, which is to remove the words offend, insult and humiliate, replace them with harass, so it would only be unlawful to harass or intimidate someone on the basis of their race, and also add to 18D a truth defence, and also make sure that there is an objective test for who can be offended, although offend wouldn't be in there anymore, then I think that will go almost all the way to ensuring that there would never be another Andrew Bolt case or QUT case or Bill Leak case. Now, of course, the only absolute guarantee is a full repeal of the law, but my assessment is there is no path through this parliament for a full repeal. I think there is a path through this parliament for a substantial amendment to 18C, and that's what I'm advocating, because if we don't take this opportunity to address this, there will be more QUT cases, and I don't want to see that happen.
But James, this is one of the problems with the Liberals at the moment. I mean, I accept, you know, I'm not having a quarrel with you personally because I know you're a real stand-up person on this issue. But the Liberals simply won't fight, even in a losing cause, for a very valuable principle. Now, you mentioned, oh, well, look, you know, one of the things the government might consider as abandoning, or that you would have wanted, perhaps, is the abandoning of the whole law. That's not even one of the menu of options. Why isn't it there?
Well, because we made a realistic assessment of what is going to make progress here, Andrew. Now, here's a really important historical point. When the Abbott government considered this and ultimately abandoned it, they did so unknowingly halfway through the QUT case. The QUT incident had happened, the complaint had been made, and it was with the Human Rights Commission. Now, in proposing a reform that may or may not have passed the Parliament and abandoning that reform, they allowed the QUT case to proceed. They shouldn't have done that because that had a huge impact on these students' lives. I'm not willing to take the risk that there is another QUT case waiting in the Human Rights Commission today that we could ensure doesn't happen because we push for reform that's not even going to pass the Parliament. We have to push for reform that will pass the Parliament so that hopefully we can actually make sure that these things don't happen again.
But are you disturbed then to hear the Deputy Prime Minister of this country, right, the second in charge of the government, say today, this is not an issue. He goes to all these people in Queensland, not one of them raises it with him, which is something that Pauline Hanson, for one, finds amazing. Is he out of touch?
Well, Andrew, I heard the Deputy Prime Minister's comments, and I guess what I would say in response is there are some issues that are important to him and his constituents that no one raises with me. And that's a recognition of the fact that he and I have different constituencies. But we're all in one coalition together, and you don't hear me saying issues that are important to Barnaby Joyce aren't important and shouldn't be addressed. So I was disappointed to hear him say that just because an issue that is raised with me very often by my constituents isn't always raised with him, that he thinks the government might not need to address this issue.
Well, doesn't it seem clear then, when you've got the Deputy Prime Minister saying that, when you've got a committee that produces basically no recommendation for change to the law itself and just presents a menu from no change to tiny change or a little bit of a change, that anyone that believes in free speech now would say, listen, if I want to send a signal that free speech in this country must be defended, I cannot vote the Liberals. I must vote for One Nation, Cory Bernardi's party or the Liberal Democrats. Isn't that the blunt truth?
Well, Andrew, what the committee has given the government is everything it needs for it to proceed with the reform, and I believe it must proceed with reform to 18C. There are recommendations in the report which, if the government takes up and if it successfully passes it through the parliament, will ensure that cases like this do not happen again. And my assessment is the overwhelming majority of my colleagues, although admittedly not all of them, do agree that we need to change both the Human Rights Commission processes and the law itself. So the ball is now firmly in the government's report, and I'll be advocating very strongly, and I'm very hopeful that the government will take up the report, take up the good recommendations in the report and proceed with it.
I hope they do, James. I know that you're fighting for this. I'm sorry if it's I'm taking it out on you, but you've come on the show and try to explain this. But the whole point is, isn't this just one more issue where the Liberals and the Nationals are proving that if we want really to shake up the status quo, the Liberals are just not in the game at the moment?
Well, I'm concerned about this mostly because of the merits of the issue, Andrew, but I am also concerned about the politics of the issue. I agree it would be a mistake if we did not act on this. There is a very high community expectation that we address this issue, and if we failed to address it, I think that people would be very disappointed, and they would be right to be disappointed.
James Paterson, more strength to your arm. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Andrew.